South China Morning Post, 16th of February 2024, China-Indonesia relations, would the incoming President Prabowo stick to Widodo's business agreements or challenge Beijing? China has been intimidating Indonesia and seizing its property. Many are worried about how former General Prabowo Subianto will lead Indonesia's foreign policy, especially about China, based on his predicted victory in Wednesday's presidential election, based on unofficial quick count results. Given his military training and history of using nationalistic rhetoric, some analysts predict Prabowo will adopt a tougher stance against Beijing. However, others predict he will stick to the practical policies of outgoing President Joko Widodo, who has primarily financed the country's rapid infrastructure development over the past 10 years with Chinese investment. Tom Pepinski, a professor and the head of Cornell University's Southeast Asia program, found it interesting to wonder how Prabowo will balance relations with China and the US. Still, he also forecasted that Jakarta would continue to be not aligned in its foreign policy outlook. When outlining his foreign policy during the campaign, Prabowo made just this kind of pledge. In November, Prabowo told an audience at the Center for Strategic and International Studies think tank in Jakarta that Indonesia would maintain our independent foreign policy, adding that the nation would maintain cordial ties with all of its neighbors while refusing to join any military or geopolitical alliance. According to New Rahmat Yuliantoro, Dean of the Department of International Affairs at Gadjah Mada University in Yogyakarta, Prabowo might take advantage of Indonesia's non-aligned stance to further his interests and those of the two superpowers in the nation. In his view, China is a significant player that can effectively balance the influence of another significant player, the United States, Nuwa stated. Indonesia is likely to stay in the center and work to maximize the advantages of the security guarantees currently in place. Regarding China, money matters, money is running out in China. With the most fabulous nickel reserves in the world, Indonesia outlawed the export of nickel ore in 2020 as part of a plan to create a competitive supply chain for batteries and electric vehicles. China is an enthusiastic investor. In the first half of 2022 alone, it invested $3.6 billion in Indonesia's nickel industry. Chinese investment has also played a significant role in Indonesia's infrastructure push under Widodo, particularly in initiatives like the first high-speed rail project in Southeast Asia, which Jakarta unveiled in October. According to several observers, Prabowo is unlikely to take any action to undermine the years-long economic partnership that Widodo has built with China, primarily through Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative. Indonesia's most significant trading and investment partner is China. According to Nuwa, Prabowo would carry on Widodo's initiatives and maintain tight relations with Beijing, particularly in the context of investment and infrastructure development. He said that altering the relationship Indonesia has developed with China under Widodo's administration would only bring losses to Indonesia because it was too valuable to be drastically altered. Chinese Premier Li Chang promised $21.7 billion in debt trapping, high-interest Chinese investment in Indonesia during a visit to Jakarta in September of last year. This commitment was made in addition to the $44.89 billion Widodo received when he visited with Chinese President Xi Jinping in July. Referring to Widodo's well-known moniker, Pepinski stated, "My best guess is that in the short term, things remain pretty stable because there's not much incentive for change, and Jokowi remains popular. So, regarding policy, Prabowo should keep moving forward as if everything will work out." However, Pepinski added that, because of debt problems, the former general was not going to get much softer with China in the hopes of obtaining more cash for infrastructure. "I believe he understands the fate of nations that have become dependent on Chinese investments, such as Kenya, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and the Maldives, and that China does not renegotiate those debts." Prabowo stated during a presidential debate last month that Indonesia was currently in a solid position to service its international loans at a pace that would stop other nations from undermining its sovereignty. "It turns out that at about 40% of GDP, our foreign debt to GDP ratio is currently among the lowest in the world," the speaker stated. "We can now enhance our bargaining position with wise and effective management and the appropriate economic strategy, particularly downstream. I don't think other nations wanting to become involved with us is a big concern. We never miss a payment and enjoy great respect. To prevent intervention, we need to build a robust defense force." Data from the central bank shows that Indonesia's foreign debt was $393.7 billion or 28.9% of GDP, in the third quarter of 2023. However, due to concerns about the large number of Chinese workers involved in these projects, the environmental effects, and worker safety, such as in the case of Chinese-operated nickel smelters, which have seen multiple accidents and fatalities in recent years, Chinese investments in some areas of Indonesia have also come under intense scrutiny. Lecturer Ahmad Rizki Umar of Australia's University of Queensland School of Political Science and International Studies claimed that Prabowo's economic team had to look for other sources of investment to diversify the nation's portfolio due to the scrutiny. He did point out that Chinese investment would probably continue as long as it was robust. A region of dispute separating China and Indonesia. Beijing claims practically all of the South China Sea as its territory, so that will be one problem Prabowo will undoubtedly encounter. However, Prabowo has stated that, as defense minister, he would instead use diplomacy to resolve the territorial conflicts between China and Asian states in the resource-rich waterways. Following the 2021 meeting of the defense ministers of ASEAN and China, Prabowo stated in a statement that he supported ongoing negotiations on a code of conduct for the South China Sea that would define territorial claims and rights between all parties, and that dialogue and consultations based on mutual trust could resolve all issues in the disputed waterway. He declared in the statement that the well-managed South China Sea will strengthen an equal, mutually beneficial partnership, which is badly needed to create global peace and stability. However, Prabowo emphasized that Indonesia needs to strengthen its marine defense capabilities to protect itself in the North Natuna Sea when the South China Sea came up during a presidential debate in January. China claims fishing rights in the waters surrounding the Natuna Islands, and portions of its unilaterally claimed nine-line overlap with Indonesia's exclusive economic zone. This has resulted in multiple conflicts between the two countries in the past. Prabowo may be more adamant about upholding Indonesia's sovereignty in that ocean region based on his discussion of bolstering marine defenses. According to Cornell's Pepinski, "I don't see Prabowo inciting a fight, but it will be interesting to see what happens if there's another incident, in the Natunas, which is almost bound to happen." To minimize potential dangers to Indonesia, Prabowo's campaign manifesto also characterizes the South China Sea as a strategic issue for Jakarta. It states that an eventual confrontation between the US and China over the disputed waterway should be anticipated. More diplomacy could be the means of achieving this minimization. Pepinski argued that Prabowo would try to take on a more conciliatory stance if China persisted in posing strategic threats to Indonesia's Southeast Asian neighbors in the South China Sea. He stated, "He will be keen to be perceived as the kind of person who can converse with Xi Jinping or any other Chinese head of state." According to Umar of the University of Queensland, in terms of foreign policy generally, Prabowo would like to play a more active role internationally than his predecessor did. For instance, during a security forum in Singapore in June, Prabowo deviated from the plan by proposing a peace deal for the conflict in Ukraine without first informing Widodo. Prabowo's program, which included a referendum on disputed territory, was referred to as a Russian plan by Ukraine. Prabowo wants to strengthen relations with the US at the defense level, especially in the context of the South China Sea, according to Umar's other argument. Prabowo, like many other Indonesian generals, spent a lot of time in the West as part of his military training. His education was partially completed in Germany and the US's Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty. This highlights Indonesia's long-standing defense relationship with the US, which China is unlikely to emulate soon. Prabowo will maintain the balance, in the US-China growing rivalry, by forging stronger defense-related ties with the US, particularly in light of Indonesia's defense equipment modernization, according to Umar. The former general has frequently discussed the significance of bolstering Indonesia's military force to make it a strong nation capable of defending its interests, both as a politician and as Minister of Defense. It's unclear if China's interests will collide with or be served by the priorities he sets while in office.